It's great to see you all, or know that you're all there. And wouldn't ever describe myself as a Roman expert, more of an enthusiast. When I started work at the Trust, our office was under Byker Bridge, and I realised that Hadrian's Wall had passed almost in front of the door. So I got interested and read up about it and started to lead a guided walk. And this is based on the walk, but with great additions from George. So we'll just pull up the presentation. Here we go. And I'm going to switch off my camera so you can get a better view of it. So the Romans arrived in 43 AD and they built the wall, the Roman wall, in 122 AD. And then they used and repaired it for almost 300 years till they left in 410. And they left a pile of useful shaped building material. Really, it's amazing that so much is left at all. And when you're looking for the Roman wall, this is ideally what you would look for. So you can see the wall and the flat part in front of it, they call the berm, and the ditch in front of that to stop your enemies making a good run up to the wall. And behind the wall, the military way. So as we go through Osbourne, we're going to be looking for that sort of pattern. And this is just a cross section of the wall, just to explain what it's like. This side of Newcastle, we're looking for the narrow wall, and it would have edges made of stone, and the stone would have a neat outer edge. But inside, between the two stone outer edges, it would just be rubble and clay. So that's what we'll be looking for. And it'd be great if we could find that. So I usually start the walk up in Byker on Shields Road. This is just near the metro station. And you can see at the back, that's the East End pool. And this is what there is. And you're probably not very impressed there. But this is absolutely wonderful. If only we could find this in Ouseburn, we'd be so excited, we'd be dancing on it. And this is what it looked like when it was being dug. The Archaeological Dig was in 2005 when they were redeveloping this site. And they found just the foundation layer of the wall. It's 8 foot wide, which is the right width, but there's only 6 inches of it. It's just that foundation level. And they found it 18 inches down under a fish and chip shop. Now you'll see the wall is on the left going diagonally across. But if you look on the right-hand side of the picture, you'll see a set of pits. And they're quite exciting. People get quite excited about those. They are Sippy Pits. And Julius Caesar mentions them in one of his campaign reports. They think that they were dug on that flat bit in front of the wall, and then they stuck tree branches and pointy sticks in them, so that as the attackers were running up to the wall, they'd face this barrier of sharp sticks, and their ponies or their leather shoes would not find that very welcoming at all. They also found the ditch under Shields Road. So it's great to see a bit of the real Hadrian's Wall in the ground. And from here, we're going to set off down Shields Road towards the Ouseburn. But it is all very built up now. But we have some reports from earlier, and it's interesting to have a look at a few of these before we continue. I don't know about you, but I do love an old map. This is the Britannia Romana Map by Horsley, and the full map is on the left. That's going from North Shields at the bottom to north of Newcastle at the top. It was done in 1732. And on the right-hand side, there's just an enlargement of that bit that we're interested in around the Ouseburn. So if we have a good look, you'll see Newcastle at the top with its wall around it, with St Nicholas Church and the castle in it. A bit further down, you'll see Red Barns, and that's a farm that we'll come back to at the end of this talk. And then Ouseburn, with a funny spelling, E-W-S-B-U-R-N. And below the river, you'll see Low Heaton, and just next to what's indicating the wall, it says castle, or that's what it means. A bit lower, Moody's shop, and then Old Heaton Hall. On the next to the river, there's the glass houses marked, and then Byker Windmill. So John Horsley said when he made this, he said, near the Red Barns and upon the descent from Byker Hill to Ouseburn, I saw the track along which I believed it had gone. It's the Roman wall. But the appearance is so very faint and obscure that I lay no great stress on my conjecture, nor should I have observed it, had I not known before that it must have been thereabouts. So he's made a good job of indicating where it is, but I'm not convinced from what he said that he had a really good view. And this is what that view would have looked like. This is a view from where Byker Windmill would have stood. So it's at the top of Shields Road. Shields Road's that road going straight ahead. And it's looking towards Newcastle. And we have a drawing of this view, which is really interesting. Here it is. So this was drawn by William Stukeley in 1725. He actually gives the date that he drew it. And again, he's probably standing next to Byker Windmill. You'll see the windmills in the right-hand corner there. And he says, from Byker Mill Hill to the Ouseburn Valley, both wall and ditch are very plain, the ditch being deep with a rivulet running along it. The present common road to Tynemouth passes along its north side. The foundation of the wall is yet entire within the pastures, and a considerable ridge of it is left. So he did seem to be able to see it. I have to say, this is actually an engraving of his original drawing. So we don't know if anything was lost in that transition. But let's have a look a bit closer. You'll see I've put a blue line in, and that's where we think the edge of the Ouseburn Valley is, sort of hidden behind that bank. This is Shields Road, the common road to Tynemouth and North Shields, and you'll see it bears left as if it's going to go down Byker Bank, just as it does now. And then the last thing to point out, let's get it to move, is a little, in the field, there's a little sign and it says the fort above Ouseburn. And if you follow my yellow arrow, it points to the marker that explains. It looks like a little triangle or a tent. So maybe he was seeing the remnants of a mile castle. That's what we would hope. So it's a beautiful view, and one of the few things we have from that time. There were also some early visitors who wrote about what they could see. And Sir John Clarke in 1724 said, near to the coal works of Alderman Ridley, I observed the remains of the stone wall very distinctly, with a large vallum, that's the word he uses for the wall ditch, on the north side, but almost equal with the surface of the earth. The foundation of the stone wall appeared to me in some places about 8 foot thick, and the vallum between 16 and 20 feet. And one of my favourite visitors, William Hutton, who walked the wall both ways in 1801 at the age of 78, he writes, looking from Byker Windmill, the ditch now leaves the windmill close on the right, crosses the road from Newcastle to Shields, about 30 yards north of the toll gate, goes down the steep hill called Ouseburn, and up to another windmill. A hedge now runs in the ditch, a part of which this year for the first time is levelled and converted into a bed of potatoes, which the proprietors will allow gratis during 3 years to anyone who will level and improve the ground. This is the taste of the neighbourhood for the grandest piece of antiquity in the whole island. He had a great walk along the wall. At one point, he was chased by the local inhabitants who thought he was a tax collector. So if we go a bit further down Shields Road, what we're really looking for is to find it in the ground. And in 2006, this site was dug in preparation for building this new block of shops. And we tend to call it the Greggs site because you'll see at the right-hand end, there's a branch of Greggs. And when they dug it, they certainly did find a piece of the wall, actually a 15-metre stretch. Again, just one level, and they found tightly packed sandstone rubble in orange clay with edging stones. They found Sippy Pits next to it, and also 43 pieces of pottery from a narrow-necked jar, 3rd century apparently. And there's just a little drawing of what it would have been like there. They found the ditch under the road, and they found an awful lot of Victorian rubbish and pottery filling it. Now, those shops are built on a raft over the wall remains, with the pilings for the building in the least sensitive areas. Next time you're getting a sausage roll at Greggs, you might like to go round the corner and see the interpretation panel. It's really high up on the wall, and it's very easy to miss. I had to have it pointed out to me by one of our trustees, but do go and have a look. We're now looking towards Newcastle as if we're standing on the roof of Greggs, and you can see there's been quite a lot of even recent change and development in this area. There's Byker Bridge stretching straight ahead, and the Metro Bridge curling across the middle of the photograph. There's the bypass and the roundabout just at the top of Byker Bank. So there's, during the building of all of these things, there've been archaeological digs, but they didn't find anything. In fact, they found a lot of dumped waste, building debris, going 3 meters down and not finding the bottom really of that waste. So there's been a lot of land forming in this area. But it's been going on for some time, and John Collingwood Bruce, he visits in 1848, and he produces a handbook to the wall in 1863. It's actually a great time for promoting the importance of the Roman wall. He's very important in doing that. And he says, the wall probably began its descent at the spot where a deserted blacksmith's shop now stands. If the pilgrim can detect any traces of the wall or the fosse, the ditch, on either bank of the Ouseburn Valley, he will be fortunate. The surface of the ground has in some places been removed by brickmakers, and elsewhere it's dotted over with pigsties, potteries, flour mills, tanneries and knackers' yards to such an extent as to defy all chance of success. That's the Ouseburn story, all of that industrial development getting in the way of seeing the Roman wall. However, they did find something. When they were building some housing on Stephen Street, just next to the start of Byker Bridge on the left-hand side as you're going towards it. In 1884, they found this altar. It's only 20 inches high. It has an inscription on it, which is, I've just typed out a bit more clearly on the right there. We think that it says, Julius Maximus, a priest of the god, undertook at his own expense. He discharges the vow freely, as is deserved. Latin inscriptions are all abbreviations. So, and there's some missing, obviously, from it. So he clearly took a vow and got what he wanted, and is fulfilling that vow by making an altar to the god. You'll see at the top, there's a little divot in the top, and that's called the focus, and that's used for offerings. It's also had a hole bored through it, and it's quite worn as if it's been used as a mooring ring or a cable. And it's also been used as a sharpening stone. So it's had quite a life, that altar. Another altar has been found, dedicated by Julius Maximus, found over in Housesteads. And it says a bit more. It says he was a prefect of the first cohort of Tungrians, who were a Germanic people. So we don't know whether it was the same person, but it's a lovely little find there. And people think maybe that means it's the site of the third Mile Castle. And just a little mention of this artwork that stands at the top of Byker Bank, which you may see when you're passing on foot or in the car. Just to note that it's actually a Roman style pillar, as a subtle nod to the fact that the Roman wall passes nearby. So if you're walking that way, you can appreciate the little reference to the Roman wall. At this point, I would normally start descending into the Ouseburn Valley, saying, they looked here and they looked there, they dug and looked all over for the Roman wall, but they didn't find it. And this is a map showing all the places where there have been archaeological digs looking for the Roman wall. So the shaded area is the World Heritage Site. And the little dark areas are the digs that have been dug. And they're rather sad to read the reports. They say what they found: boulder clay, post-medieval industrial deposit, brick and building debris, a waste dump, considerable dumping, tannery, pits, lead works, Victorian cellars. No evidence of Hadrian's wall was identified. However, I'm glad to say that George is going to pick up at this point and talk about some of the more positive results and some other ways of looking at the Roman wall. George, would you like to pick up?
Yes, thank you, Lesley. So as you can see on this image and that Lesley has said, there have been quite a number of digs across the Ouseburn Valley. Just to get your bearings here as well, at the far right of the image, where the red line runs into the top right corner, that's just about where Greg's is. It's just off to the side there where that exploratory dig found something. To the left of that, the rightmost sort of purpley shape, that is the presumed location of Mile Castle 3, although they haven't found anything from it. That is currently protected by UNESCO and by English Heritage / Historic England. So that is where they believe it is, but haven't found any. And then the two purpley spots on the far left are the two next most west sections of wall that have been identified, which Lesley will get back to when I'm done with my bit. So as you can see in between, there's a very large section, about 700 meters long, where there have been no remains discovered. And in the last 50 odd years, there have been a number of excavations by commercial companies doing development in the valley to see if they can find any remains of it. And the answer so far has been no. So we're going to look at a few of those now and see what they did find and whether it's of any use to us as results to knowing about Hadrian's Wall. So the two sites we're going to look at on the right is a development called Farm View, where there's now currently a number of flats that were built in 2014 onwards. And then on the left is a site called Norris House, which has been unoccupied for a while, but is currently under development, which is quite exciting because they will be doing more archaeology there in the future. So our first site, Farm View, there's a nice image on the left of what it looks like now, and then on the right, another map showing you where it is. That map is a bit blurry, but you can see Biker Bank coming down diagonally from the right to the bottom, and you can see Shields Road and Biker Bridge running just over the top of where the red square is. And the Ouseburn obviously is the windy bit on the left. So they first started researching there in 2007 when there was a desk-based assessment conducted by Tiny Weir Museums for the developers, where they concluded that Hadrian's Wall was on the site and that there was definitely the potential there for archaeological remains. They made several assumptions in deciding this, though, the most serious of which is that they've based their decision on that based on a variety of maps from pre-ordnance survey days that include Hadrian's Wall, but aren't accurately surveyed. So they're not, and you can see those on the image, those black lines where it says line of Hadrian's Wall on the OS map. Those are all various places that it's been put in the past. So it's clear they don't have a set location for it where it was. And then you can see at the bottom, revised course of wall. That is where they later determined it probably was because they didn't find it in the top bit. So based on that 2007 desk-based assessment, TWAM also conducted an excavation in 2008 where they dug down between 2 and 3 meters. However, they couldn't get any further because they reached the natural subsoil, which is usually where in commercial archaeology you stop. They got to where there were no more modern deposits and they found natural sedimentary deposits left by the Ouseburn. And also because it started being waterlogged, they couldn't dig any deeper because the pits and the trenches were filling with water. But they did find plenty of interesting stuff about the site. For instance, there, as was known, there was a pottery in the 19th century here that covered it over. So here are some photos from that. So in the left, you can see a stone surface that was part of the buildings of that pottery. And on the right, you can see, obviously where their trench is filled with water, but you can see a number of brick features in it, which are all associated with the pottery. So following on from that, in 2009, the developers, hoping that they would continue to find nothing as they could do their development, had some boreholes taken at the site. And these are the results of that. These were by a different company called North Pennine Archaeology. And they took about 12 boreholes from the site, and they found 4 very interesting ones here, where you can read the descriptions, which are a bit verbose. But the result of those, these 4 sites, the core that they struck down hit at around 6-ish meters at the deepest, a solid sandstone obstruction. And Hadrian's Wall was largely built of sandstone blocks. The facing stones were squared nicely produced ones, and the inside is rubble of sandstone as well. And sandstone is obviously the predominant geology of the valley, which you might have learned about if you attended Carl's talk last week about the geology. These were quite interesting though, because they showed that if this was the wall, it was between 4 and 6 meters below ground, so a bit further down than they had reached in the previous year in their excavations, and certainly a bit too far down for most commercial units to actually try to reach. If they had been a university unit on a multi-year project, they might have kept going, but because it was a commercial project, they determined that that was about as far as they could get. So these sandstone plugs seemed to be linear, and they seemed to be in the line of the wall. So this was assumed, per that 2009 report, that that was the wall. And that itself has some other problems too. They thought that these sandstone rocks they hit must be at least 50 centimeters square, because the core didn't break through them, and their core was apparently powerful enough to break through brick and other things. But the core itself, the core they take, is only 5 centimeters across. So what they really are proving is they hit at least a 5 centimeter wide bit of sandstone at least these 4 places, not that it is itself the wall, which they might have been able to use other archaeological techniques like geophysical survey to prove more accurately. So in 2010, that same company went on to dig at the site. And if you look at the map on the left where the round circle is, that is where those boreholes were taken. And then the dotted line figure around it is where the building was eventually taken. And then that dashed figure to the top is where, on the right, you can see the results of their excavation. And this was quite interesting. They found at least one thing that they thought was worthwhile, which was a sandstone wall built out of sandstone blocks that was around 2 meters deep, that was not on the line of Hadrian's wall, but was quite substantial. It was about 6 feet wide, not the full 8 feet that you get with the broad wall. It was higher up than the deposits they'd found in the boreholes. And it was running roughly the right direction, that if you had been stood at the top of the valley 200 years previously and looked down, you might have thought that this was the remains of Hadrian's wall. So there was a few years then where nothing happened, and they were in planning hell. And in 2013, another series of excavations were carried out on the site. This time they were digging into the hillside, which you can see on the right side of the image, just sort of right and down of the oval, which is where those previous digs and boreholes were. You can see some markings, and that's the results of what they found. They carved away the hillside at farm view to see if they could find the remains of the wall or anything archaeologically interesting in section, and that's what that looked like. The hillside, you can see all that black stuff is made ground. That's a fill deposit put in later. On the right-hand side, you can see kind of orangey blocks sticking out, and that is actually a section of the sandstone bedrock of the valley. And then just next to it, you can see a really dark black band going down, and that is a section of a tunnel or pit dug in some unknown time in the past, which probably linked up to the coal mines, which are all underneath the Ouseburn Valley. And then on the far left, you can see kind of brick structure in the wall, which is related to the pottery. Here's some more photos. This one where it wasn't snowy, but you can see on the left, you can see the sandstone outcropping. And you can see that it's a lot of made ground fill, but certainly no 8-foot wide wall coming out of there that's just been buried all this time. And here you can see more exposed hillside. At the bottom, that brownish layer is a river deposit from the Ouseburn silty soil. And then here's that pit, which is lined with nice, probably too small to be Hadrian's Wall facing stones, but sandstone blocks. And there's another picture of one of those blocks. That's a 50 centimeter scale next to it. Sorry, a 1 meter scale next to it. And then here's another wall associated. This is not Hadrian's Wall, but this is another wall from that pottery, which is built out of sandstone blocks. And the reason I find these interesting is that they're regular, and these are certainly places where, had Hadrian's Wall been there and been a useful local supply of nice stone pre-carved blocks, if they had stolen them, this is where they would have ended up, is in structures like this. The very first industrial things on the site. The one interesting thing that came out of this excavation in 2013 is they found this, which is a sandstone water trough, which had been embedded in the hillside and appears to have been there since the 19th century. It was put there on display by the pottery workers who were looking for something Roman. The landowner was clearly interested because he's mentioned several times by Bruce in his records of crossing the valley. And now, if you go there, they have a nice display on the site interpreting what they thought Hadrian's Wall looked like. And if you look at it, you can see they've depicted it going in a nice straight line across the river. The valley, obviously, in this picture, before they built in the quay walls for the valley, the Ouseburn was much wider and flooded more of the valley than it does now. The valley was also shallower, as you can see, but you can see it going nicely straight up the opposite hill towards the center of Newcastle. And they've also, interestingly, because obviously now if you go to the Ouseburn, it's not amazingly wide, that because they've interpreted the valley as being, the river being wider, they've instead put Hadrian's Wall on pontoons going across it, rather than being a solid structure with maybe a small culvert at the bottom. It is properly a bridge. All right, so the next site, now on the west side of the Ouseburn Valley, right at the top of Stepney Bank by Crawhall Road, is Norris House, which you can see in the top right, a picture of what it looked like, and then a map of where it is in the bottom, if that matters to you. But ooh, the rings have all moved here. That's a bit annoying. I can point out to where they are though. So they dug a number of trenches here in 2015. So the trench marked 8 on the left, where it says sondage, it's pointing a little line. Those lined bits in the middle, those are sloping faces, which they interpreted at the time of this dig as being part of the wall ditch. And then in trench 3, 4, and then trench 1, you can see gray kind of blobby areas. You can't actually see the one in trench 1 because the image has been cropped for some reason, so it's off the side. But in trench 3, 4, you can see these 2 blobby images that have been sort of cut off by the red ring. And those are sections of sandstone core for something, which about fit the size of Hadrian's Wall, although they didn't dig very far for them. So that's a picture of what, on the right, you can see those bits from trench 3, 4, the remains, very small sandstone fragments in the core, unlike what I've seen at other places, most notably recently at Segedunum, where there are much larger pieces used to build the wall core. And then in trench 1, which you couldn't see on the image anymore, there was this section of sandstone rubble in it. And then in trench 8, this was the ditch that they excavated. You can see it sloping down on the image on the right into that sondage, which is sondage is sort of archaeological term for a trench within a trench, a mini trench. Right, so that is 2 sort of good case studies of archaeology in the valley. Obviously, there are a lot of other places where things have been dug, and it could get a bit exhaustive talking about all the site reports and all the things. These 2 are quite interesting, though, because of the number of times they'd looked at farm view. And then Norris House is quite interesting because it's currently under planning permission to be demolished, and they're going to build, if they get permission, a large block of student flats there, which include that they're going to build underground parking, which means that all of this, you can see in the image on the left, that ground level concrete is all going to get jackhammered up, and they're going to have to dig to build that, which means they're going to have to get some more archaeologists in to look around to see if they find anything else, because obviously they have already hit deposits which could be quite interesting to UNESCO or to someone else that might want to be protected by them. So if they go ahead with that, then that'll be a great opportunity in the future for us to see if this is actually a site where Hadrian's Wall survived to the same level that it does at Greg's and at the East End Pool, like Lesley had said. So going on, there are other ways, though, that we can look for Hadrian's Wall in the valley, since we can't actually find it by digging for it in the traditional archaeological method. So this is one of the 2 projects I'm going to talk about that I've been doing as part of the Hadrian's Wall interest group. We've been looking into more ways that we can identify the wall in the valley. So this is a map of borehole locations. These are all boreholes taken and preserved on the British Geological Survey website. And you can see the dashed line for approximate line of Hadrian's Wall. And what I've done with these boreholes is I've taken the data from them, from the reports published with them. And what it shows is the depth from the current ground level to where the geologist interpreted that the natural ground level was. So the difference between that is made ground that has been filled in by human activity in the last 200 or more years. So as you can see, the red ones represent greater depths at the bottom of the legend. So those are between 4 meters and 21 meters of fill. And then the light ones are much less. So just 20 centimeters to a little under 1.5 meters. Looking at this, I've gotten the impression from this data that makes the most sense to me is that the valley has been filled in more at the riverside, and the deeper parts of it have been filled in more, whereas the hillsides have been filled in less. And that makes sense because as an archaeologist, I know that hills tend to, the surface deposits on top of hills tend to wash downhill. So soil will be shallower on the top of a hill, but thicker at the bottom of the hill where it's been run off by rainwater. And certainly gravity helps as well with things, because if you know much about the Ouseburn, just to the north of here is where the culvert is. And the culvert is largely filled in with man-made debris on purpose by people dumping their trash. So it's likely that a lot of this made ground in the Ouseburn is similar. It is made by fill of trash and industrial debris, which is largely what they were seeing at Farm View when they were digging there. So what this says is that the natural level of the valley before human activity started seriously in there 200 years ago was about 6 meters below where it is now at those sections where the wall crosses the center of the valley at the bottom. And that is corroborated by the boreholes from Farm View. So if we were going to find Hadrian's Wall, we'd have to be digging 6 meters down. And I certainly don't think when those men were recording it that it was that much higher up. It was probably at best only just sticking out, but certainly not big and prominent like you would hope, or you might see further west at sites like Housesteads. So what I'm hoping to do with this is develop a better profile of what the valley looked like in the Roman period by trying to figure out how much it's filled in from sedimentation and then from that natural fill, to get a better idea of where, if you were going to dig, how far down you'd have to go to find Hadrian's Wall. And so that is the first bit of research. And my second set of research is something called stone sourcing, which is a project that we adopted from the Newcastle University's Wall Cap project, where they had been going to a variety of sites along Hadrian's Wall, and they've been looking for where stones from the facing have been reused. So this is a picture of a wall on the path by Farm View. This is actually just right next to the sheep field for Ouseburn Farm, and you might know it. And I've gone, and this is something called photogrammetry, where I've used a scale, which you can kind of see covered up in the image at the bottom left. That's a 50 centimeter scale. And I've taken a photo of the wall, and I've used the scale to figure out the sizes of all of these stones. And this is useful to us because Hadrian's Wall was built out of fairly uniform stones that were cut to be about the same size and the same shape. And that was dimensions that are roughly about 26 centimeters across the face, 18 centimeters tall, and then 38 centimeters deep, and they taper a bit towards the back. But they're usually flat surfaces, flat edges on the facing. So using that data and going about 10% over or under, these are all the stones that fit that criteria in just this section of wall. And this is a 10-meter section of wall, and this is just one of a number of walls that you can find in the valley that have old stones like this. These are walls that, if you go back in old maps, have been there for at least the last 150 years. So before modern stone quarrying happened and lots of stones could be imported cheaply, if you were finding a local stone to use in your local wall and Hadrian's Wall was there, you might as well go grab a stone off it. It's a lot easier and certainly a lot cheaper than paying someone for it. So these are just an example, but they're not for certain stones from Hadrian's Wall. There are a number of ways we're can go in further to look for them. This is just dimensions, which is perhaps the easiest thing we can see at face value. But we have to also look at the stone petrology, the structure of it, chemically, knowing that it's the right sort of sandstone. But this is actually not going to be too hard. This is the next area of research I'm looking into. Hadrian's Wall was also largely built of stone carved locally. So these are likely stones, or not these stones, but the stones in Hadrian's Wall in the Ouseburn were most likely quarried out of the Ouseburn. So they would resemble the local sandstone that you can see in places like at Farm View. So comparative analysis there would certainly yield a more fine sifting of the results, and hopefully we'll get a better idea if some of these stones are from Hadrian's Wall. Right, so now I think we're gonna go back to Lesley, who's gonna talk about the rest of the Ouseburn after Norris House.
Taking this photograph here of the Newcastle end of Byker Bridge, top of Stepney Bank and Crowhall Road. It's commonly called Red Barns because there used to be a farm here. And in 1868, St Dominic's Priory was built here with a school on this corner site. So you can see Norris House is marked on the left-hand side, but there have been two other digs looking for the Roman wall, both successful. So I thought we'd just finish by having another look at some real stones in the ground. In 1928, they dug at the back of St Dominic's Priory Church, and this is looking towards the Ouseburn, and you can see there's the Roman wall in situ. They also saw the ditch as well when they were digging at that time. And this is a nice newspaper article from the time. It's the same trench, but looking the other way, looking towards Newcastle, with the end of St Dominic's Church at the back, and the prior and two monks in the trench in their white robes. And I went looking for the site, and somewhere at the back of St Dominic's, you can see the curved wall just behind there, but I couldn't get any closer. But I did discover a nice little seat on the very near to the site of the Roman wall. They also knocked the school down in 1981 to build this small area of housing, and during that dig they did find a single foundation course of the wall, and one course of the stones above the foundation. They looked for the military way but didn't find that either. And the nice thing is that these houses are also built on a raft over the remains of the wall, and they have marked the line in the pavement with this cobbled paving, and also on the side of the house. I don't know if you can see it, I've just marked it there, showing how high the Roman wall would have been when it was in its full glory. And you'll see there's a plaque there marking the wall. And I thought we'd just end with an artist's impression of how the wall then continued. So Red Barns is just where the wall enters the picture on the extreme right, and it then crosses the Pandon Burn and the Lort Burn to Newcastle and the fort there, and onwards to the west. So obviously it's a artist's impression, so we don't know exactly how it would have crossed those two streams, but it's interesting to see what it might have looked like. That's the end of our talk. And I hope you will, at some point, go on your own walk through the valley and enjoy the history under your feet of the Roman wall.